Hello everyone, welcome to class this week. And as you know, we are talking about instructional theory, and this is in contrast with learning theory, which we will be talking about separately. So, just to kick us off, I like this quote. This is from the Green Book, which I'm going to be explaining a little bit more in a minute here, the history of the Green Book, but this quote from their introductory chapter. Until theorists begin to build upon each other's contributions, the field will remain in its infancy. So the purpose of the Green Book was really to try to build some consensus around ideas, feeling like the field has matured enough as an instructional field to be able to have some consensus around ideas and that we can stop trying to recreate the wheel, as we talked about a little bit in the history part of this course, where we mentioned some ideas that seem to keep getting repeated and keep getting brought up. The goal of the Green Book was to try to get past that and to build some consensus that we can then build upon and actually progress in the field. So first, some announcements. Cami has the devotional for next week, so remember that. Also, your teaching and T and P, that's tenure and tenure and promotion. That's, you can tell what's on my mind lately. Yours are actually T and L papers, teaching and learning philosophy papers that are going to be due on October 12th. So let's review the requirements for that real quick. So here in Learning Suite, this is what we say about this assignment. This is going to be part of your online portfolio. I would recommend posting this on your website. A lot of people do that. I think it's a good reason why, a good thing to have in your portfolio. When you go out and look for jobs, people will ask you, some will ask you specifically for a teaching and learning statement. That they'll just say, send your resume, send your letters of recommendation, and send your teaching and learning statements. So it's good to have one that you can kind of be developing and improving upon while you're a student. Those jobs that maybe don't ask you specifically for a teaching and learning statement, they'll ask you for things that are related to a teaching and learning statement. They'll interview you and say things like, tell me what your theory is on learning, tell me how you would go about teaching or designing instruction for someone. So having a statement where you've thought out your ideas already is really good, because then you'll be better prepped to answer those questions in an interview. So I think it's a really good professional activity to have a teaching learning statement that you can use as you go out on the job market. I had one that helped me quite a bit as I went and interviewed for positions when I was on the market. So this will be part of your online portfolio as well as a class statement. Base it upon our readings and your past experiences so that you can write a statement that's 2 to 3 pages long about what you think it means to learn and how we can effectively teach and design teaching environments for others. So the idea here is that there's no one right way to interpret learning and teaching, that there are lots of different theories, and really what matters to me is what you think teaching and learning is about and what guides your practice. What are kind of your personal mission statements in regards to this? So I'm not looking for a correct answer. What I am looking for is that you can support your answer with sources from the readings. So it says here you should cite class readings and other readings that you find, at least 4, and that you can also show me that you understand the theories that we have been talking about, at least some of them, and that you can also talk about how this applies to you in practice. So maybe a good way to think about this would be to have a paper where you have kind of an intro to how you frame teaching and learning, and then to talk about a couple theories that you think are really relevant and explain them, why you think they're relevant, cite sources, and then give examples of this in practice. So say, for example, when I teach Sunday school, or when I teach elementary kids, I use this theory in this way. This is how I design instruction or teach based upon my theory. So I am kind of a social constructivist, and we'll talk more about that when we get into social and learning theory in general. So when I did my teaching and learning statement, I would say things like, I believe that learning happens in these social ways. For example, when I teach, here is what I do to organize my class into communities that can support each other in their learning. And I would talk about specific things that I do. So I would look for things like that. And I realize some of you may not have professional teaching experience. You can think hypothetically about things you would do as a teacher, things you would do as a designer, or if you have examples, like I said, could be Sunday school, things like that. That would be fine. Or teaching as a parent teaching your children, or something like that. It can be lots of different things. So I'm looking for some understanding of theory and research, some citations, and then some kind of embedding it into some actual practice examples to help us understand what you mean, because learning theory is very ambiguous until it's situated in practice. Okay, your audience should include those who are not just members of the LDS faith. And what I mean by this kind of statement right here is that I get a lot of papers every year which are like, I believe all learning happens through the Holy Ghost, and that the Spirit helps us to learn, and that we need to help people understand that they're agents and children of Heavenly Father and all that kind of thing. And I believe all of that. I truly do believe that the Holy Ghost teaches us secular subjects as well as spiritual subjects. So I believe that. However, that doesn't communicate very well to members not of our faith. And I want this to be a statement that communicates to people not of our faith. So think about that as you're doing that. So, an alternative, you could do a statement about designing instruction. So instead of teaching about designing instruction, that could be possible as well. Same thing, cite resources. And then here, I know this is going to stress some of you out because you don't feel like you know very much about teaching and learning yet. That's fine. Make the statement. This is partly an academic exercise for our class. You can improve this statement as you go throughout your program, and I hope you would kind of revisit it and reflect upon it again. So that's what the assignment is going to be. Those papers are due on October 12th. I mention it now because instructional theory will probably play into those papers, as well as learning theory, which is what we're going to be doing next week. So for next week, these are what we're going to be reading. You're going to be reading a paper by Ertmer and Newby, which is about behaviorism, cognitivism, and constructivism, which is kind of the trichotomy that is kind of big. And then social theories are a really big thing in the field now, and they're really hard to understand. And it's really hard to find a good paper on social learning theory because it is hard to understand. Barab and Plucker is perhaps, it's not the easiest article to read, but to be honest with you, I actually think it's the easiest article on social learning theory that I found. It explains it for me in a way that makes sense. So they review several different kinds of social learning theories. So read that for social perspectives. And then Gagne, as you know, is a big person in our field with his 9 events of instruction. And I'd love for you to read Gagne, but he writes his stuff in books. And Gagne doesn't really have a concise article that I know of that summarizes his ideas. So this is a person named Cruz who has done that, who has summarized Gagne into something simple to read so that you can get as much out of your reading as possible. So read Cruz, but it's really about Gagne, and that should be in the Mendeley group. And remember to keep working on your coding. And next week, come with your questions, or you can email me ahead of time. I'm happy to answer those questions ahead of time, but definitely make sure you've got things to talk about. Next week, we're going to have a question and answer period where you can say, hey, here's an article. We had no idea how to code this article. What should we do? And I'll be able to help address those. So, a couple of things about theory. I just wanted to talk a little bit about this green book. So this is Charlie Regaluth right here. He is an alumni of our department, Brigham Young University. Instructional Science, I think, was the name of the department at the time. He was a contemporary of Andy Gibbons and Brent Wilson and some of those folks. He's not LDS, just so I just say that not because I think he's a wonderful, awesome person, but I just don't want you to assume he is and then maybe embarrass yourself if you ever meet him. He's not, but he is a wonderful person, came to BYU, and has done really good things in the field. A lot of his personal research interests are in educational reform, systemic change, and how you change and improve educational systems. But he is also a big theorist, and he wrote this book that it was a green book. It had a green cover on it, so they called it the Green Book, and it was all about theories, and it was all the major theories in the field, and everyone wrote a chapter in this book about theories. And that got revised into a second edition. It originally had a companion novel, which was a book about how to implement these theories into actual practice. And that was, I think, a yellow covered book. And so it was called the Green Book and the Yellow Book. And that was how people distinguished between the two because they were kind of companions. So that's kind of why we call it that. And then in this third volume, he brought in Ali Shellman, who is at Penn State, a wonderful scholar and also one of Regaluth's advisees at a time. And so the goal of this third edition is this was meant to be the final version of the book. And their frustration was, this quote right here, that people kept repeating theories and reinventing theories over and over again. And they wanted to say, look, we're at a point now where we need to build upon each other's contributions, not reinvent the wheel. and we need to say these are the kind of big ideas in theory, and there may be other theories that have similar names, but these are the big ideas. These are simulation approaches. That's why they name the chapters that. These are direct instruction approaches, and there could be several different theories that are all direct instruction, but let's combine them together and talk about direct instruction as an overall approach. So that was kind of the idea of this book. And they organized the book into kind of different sections in a way. And they talk about this in the first chapter, saying that there are different kinds of theories that you need to have when you are designing instruction. A lot of times we think only about learning theory, but learning theory doesn't explain a lot of other things that go on in instruction, like how you assess students, how you plan instruction, and how you design the events that go on in instruction, how you would go about analyzing learner needs. We talk about ADDIE, and the first step is analysis. Well, how do you go about analyzing learner needs and task analysis and things like that? There's a whole bunch of theory on how you've designed instruction, but so what? How do you actually implement the instruction in a way that it'll actually have impact? And that's what he cares about with systemic change and school reform. You can have really good ideas, but it's a whole nother ball of wax to try to get those ideas to actually change anything in education. So there's implementation theory, and then there's theory about evaluating and how you know if something is working or not. So this may seem, I don't know, to some of you like, well, just a lot of academic blah, blah, blah. But I think it's really helpful to realize that there are ideas about the different steps of instruction, and to realize that instruction is not just getting out there and just winging it, that there are steps, there are events that you have to do, there's analysis you need to do, there's planning, there's implementation you need to think about, that all of these things matter to effective instruction, and that there are theories and ideas to help you do each of these different things. That's all I'll say about it. There's a lot more I could say about that. I would just say, read the book. Check out the book, buy a copy for yourself, and learn about all these different kinds of theories that would benefit you. So overall thoughts, I have a couple questions in Learning Suite here for you to respond to. As you've kind of learned from each other about these theories and kind of had a chance to maybe skim over some ideas and get in depth in one chapter yourself, what do you think we know a lot about? Looking back at this list, which of these kinds of theories do you think we've got a pretty good grasp on, and maybe we don't need to do very much more exploration on? But then the alternative question is, which of these things maybe do we not know very much about, and maybe we need to do a lot more theory development and maybe research in this particular area? So that's kind of what I want you to explore. What do we know a lot about when it comes to instruction, and what do we need to still understand better to do our jobs? Maybe a quote from the textbook that I like. And this comes from, now we're switching to Dr. Merrill, Dave Merrill. And he says, different theories and models do share common principles. They do not incorporate fundamentally different principles. No theory includes principles that are contrary to those identified. This is a quote from Dave Merrill. So Dave's idea is that, bunk. All these theories, ridiculous. This whole book, Green Book, ridiculous. Really? All theories come down to this right here, these things. And I won't go over it because you've read that paper. But that was the idea behind Merrill. And Merrill was actually Charlie Regalu's advisor. So Charlie started, doing these books that were all these different theories. And Merrill said, bunk, they're all the same theory. And Charlie Regalu said, I think you need to think about that a little bit more because I don't think you're right. And they're friends, and so it was kind of a friendly little debate. And so Dave Merrill said, well, okay, I will. And so Dave Merrill took a sabbatical where he studied all the learning theories and tried to distill them down into these core principles that he called the first principles of instruction. So the other question that I want you to do here in Learning Suite is to take your theory and try to fit it on here. And let's see if we can prove Merrill right or wrong. Does your theory fit? Can your theory really be reduced down to just these ideas? Or maybe can you think of a theory that doesn't? Can we think of something that maybe doesn't fit onto Merrill's first principles? Is Merrill right in saying that everything really comes down to these first principles? Or is he maybe exaggerating a little bit there? So that's the other question that I want you to explore here in this discussion thread. So have fun with those ideas, and maybe we'll talk a little bit more about Merrill and when we touch base together in class.